Hello, everyone, and happy Friday. So, today I'm excited to be on here to talk to you guys about what you should do if you filed your return and you ended up owing. So, tax season just ended, and maybe you filed your return and now you owe and you're not sure what to do. I'm going to walk you through what you should do, what you should be thinking about if you owe a balance, and even talking about what that balance might be, right? So, you might owe a lot, you might owe a little bit. That's what we're going to talk about today. I am Shanta Thomas. If you don't know me, I have been in this industry for over 20 years and actually 21 years. I just got there. And I have been doing this for large firms, small firms, and everything in between. So I know what I'm talking about. I'm also an enrolled agent. For those of you who don't know what an enrolled agent is, that's just somebody who took a series of exams with the Internal Revenue Service so that they can represent clients before the Internal Revenue Service. That's me. So today, again, I want to talk to you about if you filed your return and ended up owing a balance, what you should be thinking about, what you should be doing. The very first thing is if you owed a balance and didn't know what to do with that balance, the first thing you want to do is take a breath. So I know some of you file your returns on your own. Some of you file a return with another professional. So if you filed with a professional and you owed, or even if you filed on your own and you owed and you don't have the next steps in terms of what to do, the first thing you need to do is really sit down and look at your balance, right? So you want to verify that the number that you see is correct. The second thing that you want to think about too when you're looking at that number is yes, if this number is correct, what are the penalties and interest that are going to be accrued or added? And the reason why this is really important is when you have a balance that is owed at the end of a tax season, that means, yes, you still are going to need to you're going to need to make the payment, but the IRS is typically going to add penalty and they're going to add interest. The great news is because you filed on time, there is no failure to file penalty. And the reason why that's important is the failure to file penalty is one of the most costly penalties. It's 5% every month that there's an outstanding balance. 5%. It maxes out at 25%. So let's say you owe $1,000. If you did not file on time, after just 5 months, you off that $1,000, you would now owe $1,250. So it's really important to make sure the failure to file penalty is in fact not there. So if you are somebody who this is not who this video is for, saying you already filed and you know you owe a balance, then you want to go ahead and get filed right away. Some of you know you're going to owe a balance even before you file. And so that's the reason you didn't file. I still encourage you to file right away because if you file like today, only a small percentage of that 5% for the month is going to apply. But the longer you wait, the more that's going to be. So they accrue that 5% over the month. So the sooner you file, the less of that 5% you'll pay. Um, every single month they will add an additional 5% until you hit that 25%. So the one thing I would tell you is if you didn't file because you know you're going to owe, then have them have sorry guys, I'm getting a message from my husband. I just hate when this stuff happens. um so if you didn't file, go ahead and get it filed because that penalty is going to be the highest. Now if you did file and you know that in fact you have a balance, then you want to get that balance paid as soon as possible as well. And the reason why you want to get that balance paid as soon as possible because there is still a penalty that gets accrued. I believe it's 0.5%. It's 0.5% a month. It also maxes out at 25%, but that penalty is also accruing as well. So you're going to not just pay the balance, you're going to pay that balance plus some, and there's going to be interest. So you want to get that done as soon as possible. So the first thing is look at the balance. If you think the balance amount is correct, great. The next thing you want to focus on is um, can what the penalties and things might be. After you understand what the penalties are, the next thing is, can you actually abate any of the penalties? So if you don't know what penalty abatement is, it's basically, are there ways in which you can reduce the penalty amount, and or remove a penalty? And so the types of penalties, they really fall into two main categories. There are um, reasonable cause. So it could be something like hospitalization, um, didn't have your records, different things like that, or first time penalty abatement. So if you've not had this situation before, that would fall into first time penalty abatement. If you fall into one of those categories, then you can apply to remove the penalties. Now, why is this important? If you have a penalty, let's say you have a penalty on your balance for not filing on time, and let's say that penalty is $100. If you get that penalty removed, that will lower how much you're going to owe in the end, right? So we want to get that number down as low as we can, because that will not only impact if you pay it in full, what that amount is, it will also impact if you don't pay it in full, what your monthly payment plan can be. So you want to make sure that you are dealing with that penalty first. Okay. So look at the balance. If it's correct, the next thing you want to do is you want to look at the penalty amount. Can you remove any of the penalty amount? After you do that, then you need to understand the next thing the IRS is looking for you to do is to get into some sort of agreement with them. So now you need to get into an agreement with the IRS. What does that look like? You need to get into a situation where you can pay the penalty, you can pay the balance, you can resolve the issue, right? So can you pay it in full? Can you make it a monthly payment? That's called an installment agreement, right? Or can you pay the balance in full? It depends on what the amount is. You can look at being able to do that. So what are your options for owing? So now that you owe, is it a balance you can pay in full? Is it a balance you have to pay over time? But you want to make sure that you're figuring out how to resolve the debt and what's the best option. So there are multiple options that it comes for paying the balance. There's a pay in full that I just mentioned. There's a monthly payment plan, which is known as an installment agreement. So basically, you take the balance and you're going to look at making a payment. You have up to 10 years to pay. I usually try and tell people you want to look at, how quickly you can get the balance paid off, because you don't really want to owe the IRS for multiple reasons. So look at, can you set up some sort of monthly payment plan with the IRS? Okay. The third type of way that you can reduce things, and I like to call this income driven. So think income driven payment plan. This is basically, they look at your income, they look at your expenses. It's called a partial pay installment agreement. So instead of you paying the full balance, they say, well, you can't really afford the full balance. We can give you a monthly payment of $50, $100, things like that, right? So it's a portion of what it is that you owe that you end up paying overall, but you're making monthly payments based on how much income and expenses. Now, a lot of people think that when I say that, all of their income and expenses will be considered for this partial pay. They're not. The IRS has thresholds, like they have maximum amounts that you can pay for things like housing, depending on how many people are in your house, where you live, what county you're in. All of those will determine what they'll accept in terms of expenses. So once you have the outline of what the expenses are, then you want to see, okay, based on that, what might they accept each month in terms of a monthly payment plan, to see if that is applicable for you to be able to make your payment. So that I call that income driven, but it's actually called a partial pay installment agreement. Then we have offers and compromise. This is what everybody wants to do, right? Fresh start programs. So your fresh start program, or your offer and compromise, is really what it's called. It allows you to settle the balance for a smaller amount. For something like that, you're going to need to work with a professional. That's very hard, even for professionals to get. For someone who's not a professional, it's going to be super hard. So you have to see with a professional whether or not you will be able to get something like an offer and compromise. And a lot of people would say, well, I think I can try and do it myself. You absolutely can try, but I will tell you, most of those don't get approved, and they don't get approved because people aren't filling out the paperwork properly. So that's what it boils down to. So you really want to work with a professional there. The other thing you can look at doing is currently not collectible. So let's say you have a large balance. You're like, I can't pay this balance. Well, that's known as currently not collectible. Again, they're going to look at your income, your expenses, assets. Can you pull money from anywhere? Can you make any payment towards the payment? If not, let's just say you're in a place where you can afford it, well, then you will go into currently not collectible. They again have only they have certain expense requirements, which means there are certain thresholds they will only accept certain expenses. So even though you might have $1,000 in credit card, they are not going to accept those as a viable expense. To them, that's excess income that can go towards a monthly payment. So your expenses have to line up. And sometimes we have to look at our client's information for currently not collectible and see where it makes sense to support them, um, so that they can qualify for currently not collectible. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying doing anything illegal, but there are different things that we should be looking at to see whether somebody qualifies or don't qualifies, because certain expenses they don't accept. So we don't use those in our calculations because they don't accept those expenses. So we want to make sure that expenses that we're going to outline are expenses you can actually write off. And then the last thing you can do if you have a balance, you can just do nothing. Now, obviously, I don't recommend do nothing because your failure to file penalty, if you didn't file already, is increasing. Your failure to pay penalty, if that's going to be 5.5% a month. That maxes out 25%, but it could be 50 months before you hit 25%. And 25% of the balance that's getting added on top of interest is a considerable amount. So you want to make sure that you are dealing with the balance. You don't want to just ignore it. That interest is accruing every month, right? And it compounds daily. You want to make sure that you're figuring out how to pay the balance that you owe. So just because you found out that you filed your taxes and you owe, or even you may didn't file because you know that you're going to owe, the worst thing you can do is the last category and put it off. Putting it off means you are literally going to put yourself in a position where you're going to end up paying a ton more than you need to pay simply because you put it off. So don't put it off. You don't want to put it off. All right. So let's look back at penalties and interest. That was one of the first things I said you needed to look at first, right? When it comes to penalty, again, you have different ways that you can remove the penalty, right? So we have first time penalty. This is the first time it's happened. That's first time penalty abatement. And then we also have a reasonable cause. Are there any reasons that could help also reduce the balance? That can help you make your monthly payment. That can help you pay it off, right? So if you have multiple penalties, it's like, well, these don't apply to me, then you can look at reducing it. Case in point, I had someone that I met with today actually who had a professional that they work with. For 3 years, the person had not filed their returns. So there were 3 years, 22, 23, and 24. They didn't file their returns during that time period. Well, guess what? That's not their fault that it didn't get filed, right? That's the preparer's fault. So one of the things they can do is we can go in and say, hey, this is the professional's fault. We submitted the forms. We thought this had been submitted. We thought this had been filed. We just found out that they actually never filed it. They didn't file it until this year. We actually could see when they filed it, which was February of 2026. That's not the client's fault that it was never filed. They were told that it was going to be filed. So as a result, guess what? They now can use that uh, as a penalty removal. I don't want to say excuse, but that is the reason why. So that's their reason, and that would fall under reasonable cause. So now we can work with them to get that removed. So you want to make sure before you pay a balance, because the IRS is not going to give you your money back once you pay a balance, right? Or it's really hard to get your money back. So you want to make sure that it's viable penalties before you actually pay. All right. So that's all I have for you today. If anyone has any questions, you can drop those. I'll be happy to answer those on while I'm live. But those are the things you want to look at. If you owed, this year after filing your return, again, you want to make sure that you are looking at the balance, make sure it's correct. You want to look at the penalties, see if you can remove any. And the third thing you want to do is then get into some sort of payment plan or pay the full balance in full. If you are needing any assistance with doing any of these things, I will be happy to assist you. I'm going to drop my link in the comments where you can set up a call with me and we'll walk you through how to do any of these things. We can help you get into an installment agreement. We can abate your penalties for you. And if you need to do something like an offer and compromise or a income driven payment plan, we can help you with those as well. So thank you so much and stay tuned for our upcoming lesson. Hopefully next week we'll be back for another lesson. So that's all I have for you today. And I hope that's been helpful. I'll see you in the next lesson.